Hi, my name is Sarah Gottlieb and you are listening to The Sound of Color. I work as a designer and I just love colors. Colors are almost like a physical thing to me. When I just feel like licking a color, touching it, or just smearing it all over myself, well, then I know that this is definitely a color that I need to use in my own work. In this podcast, you will meet designers, artists, and creatives, and you will hear their personal story about their own work and their passion for color.
Color is not about paint. Color is about surfaces.
This episode of The Sound of Color is brought to you in collaboration with Montana Furniture. I'm very excited about my podcast sponsor because Montana Furniture has been part of creating more playful spaces by bringing colors and high quality furniture into private homes, offices, universities, boardrooms, restaurants, lobbies and concert halls. So, as you can hear, they are just as big color nerds as me. Well, let's start the interview. Hi Dagny.
Hello, Sarah.
I just want to say thank you for joining me as a guest here on the Sound of Color podcast. Today's guest in this episode is color designer Dagny Thurmann-Moe.
Everyone who works with creating environments has an obligation to create environments that makes the people calmer and happier and that they feel safer. It's so important.
Dagny is one of Norway's leading color designers and has run her own studio, Koi Color Studio, for more than a decade. She has a profound interest in color and her work focuses on colors and materials and how they affect our surroundings and especially how they affect our mental well-being. She is a well-known face in the media and often comments on the use of color, trends and the value of the proper use of color in both architecture, interiors and fashion. In 2017, she published the book Color to the People, a book about why and how we should use color in a more targeted way. In the book, Dagny fights the battle against an increasingly achromatic existence. This and much more is what you will hear about in this episode of The Sound of Color. But first of all, we're going to hear where Dagny's love of colors originally comes from.
I think that pretty much like any other kid, I loved colors. So I was very obsessed about colors from a very early stage, like daycare. And it started with clothes, actually. When I could start choosing my own clothes, I was very into colors. And I was very into which colors to wear. And in kindergarten, I wanted specific clothes and colors. And then when I got home, I changed, which drove my mom crazy. She wanted me to be kind of like a tomboy, which she was. And I was not having any of it. So I did not want to climb trees. I did not want to wear like the navy blue clothes with hoodies and, a hat that she wanted me to wear. I wanted dresses and gowns and,
Amazing.
Yeah, and she was like, where is this coming from?
She was like, I don't recognize myself in my kid.
Yes, and she was like, she's terrorizing me with, changing outfits all the time. And I was like, but I need this color now and I need that color at this time. So for me, it was just practical, It made total sense for me and not for her whatsoever. But she really let me, play and do my thing. And then I was also very, a calm child. So I loved to read and do puzzles and, play with Barbie, which was also about clothes and, outfits. And then when I started school, she let me decorate my room.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and that was when my interest in colors on interior started.
Yeah, and what did you do in your room?
No, it was a mix of white and turquoise and pink with black details.
That sounds...
I know.
Spot on for the 80s.
Yes, and throughout my elementary school and then middle school, ungdomsskola, I got to change my room and repaint it so it changed throughout the years with the different colors that I needed and wanted. I had a blue period and then I had bright green and it was interesting. And then I started decorating the rest of the house also.
Really early on, Dagny developed a profound interest in color, and her mother happily embraced that. At just 15 years old, Dagny decorated their entire house. And it definitely didn't end there. She read all the literature about colors, interior design, fashion and architecture that she could get her hands on. And she watched one TV show after another.
I wanted to understand. So I looked at pictures and tried to see patterns, and then I remember when Sex and the City started, I watched that, and I was very into how Patricia Field combined colors in clothes.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, so I watched all of the episodes. I didn't really like the storylines and the conversations, but I loved seeing the clothes. Or pretty much with all of the leading ladies, they had different aesthetics, but always a very refined mix of colors. So it's like trying to figure out what made it work. So I watched it again and again. I think I've watched every episode many times, and it was all about, like the color combinations. And then I watched other TV shows like Grand Designs, which has been going forever.
I love Grand Design. I watched so much Grand Design.
I know, it's like
Kevin McCloud.
I love Kevin McCloud.
I love Kevin McCloud too.
I did watch some Norwegian decorating shows, but the more I've gotten into it and working with it myself, it's been very difficult to see all the mistakes I think that people do in those shows.
You're like, no, that's wrong. No, that's not how you do it.
Oh, no. Don't go there. And it's like, it became a problem, so I had to stop watching them, except for Grand Designs, which is interesting from an architectural perspective,
Yeah. I actually have to say, I also in Grand Design, sometimes he actually can be quite critical, but in a very English manner. So it's like, not totally dissing people, but I quite like that actually about the program.
I actually think that's important. I think in Norway we're very afraid of, being critical, which has been really negative for the development of architecture, for example, but also I would say interior architecture, because we don't have those theoretical based discussions on why and how and what happened here and what were the strengths and what were the weaknesses. And I think that every occupation needs that. It's such an important part. I mean, I always criticize my own work and see, how can I do better the next time? What can we pull further? And what kind of materials can we work with? Can we change the materials? Can we get something even more environmentally friendlier or eco-friendly? What can we do here, and how can we get the tactility to increase? And it's I think that one of the most irritating questions I get when working with colors is that a lot of people think that it's all about paint.
Yeah, and not materials.
Yes, and I'm like, everything has color in it. Color is not about paint. Color is about surfaces, and it's you need tactility in what you see. You need depth, and you need change. If everything is painted, it will look completely flat.
Because paint is one kind of surface.
Yes, and it also in a lot of public projects we work in, we all only get to work with acrylic paint, which is basically plastic. Where the colors get really flat. So it's so important to get, woodwork and maybe, bricks, terracotta. You need textiles, for example. You need a big variation in nuances. So we're very much into nuance richness. I think that we have kind of a biophilic approach to design. And colors. I really believe strongly that we're, mammals. Our eyes are made to, function out in nature. And in nature, you see thousands and millions of nuances of colors. And then you enter a room and then you see one shade of white with gray furniture or black furniture or maybe some wood tones. And it's not enough to make your brain relax.
Dagny wants our brains to relax with the help of colors. But how exactly does she make sure that this happens?
a key word for me is wonder.
And describe that.
What I mean with wonder is that you have to actually reflect about what you're seeing, and you have to have those details where you can, feel if you're a bit unsure about what you're seeing, but it makes you curious in a way. So you want to kind of like investigate it, and you have to reflect on what you're seeing. You have to think, what's behind that corner? Is there something interesting behind there? And oh, what's that? Oh, I'm kind of curious about this. I want to see more, and I don't know if I like it or if I don't like it, or maybe I love it. Maybe it's something amazing. It's like that's the kind of feeling we want to evoke in all of the projects that we do, whether it's a city street or if it's like a hospital or a classroom, or if it's a private property or a hotel. We really want to have that sense of curiosity being evoked, and that you're not feeling indifferent about what you're seeing, because I think that indifference is a sign of stress. You can't really take in what you're seeing, and that we really experience that a lot as humans when we are in the modern city environments, where all of your surroundings are likely to be, glass and steel in achromatic palette. And achromatic means, like lacking color, pigment.
Yeah.
So it's grayscale, basically. Yeah. And what also happens when you're surrounded by grayscale is that your eyes, when you are clinically depressed, your eyes can't see as many colors or as bright colors as when you're not depressed.
Wow.
Yes, we know that.
Really?
Yes, it's really interesting. Your eyes get like a grayed veil over them, so all the colors seem subdued to you. And what we do when we create these grayscale environments is that we create environments that our brain connects with depression.
Whoa, okay, wow, that is interesting.
That's it, right? It's super interesting. And we see that with our cities, our modern cities. We see it in psychiatric institutions, we see it in hospitals, we see it in classrooms, we see it in our workspaces, and of course in our homes. And what happens when we surround ourselves with surfaces and environments that our brain connects with depression? It's
you get depressed.
You get the feeling of depression, and that is when indifference comes in to the picture. Like you don't reflect about what you're seeing; it's just there. You're not curious. You're not in a mood to investigate what is around you. You're trying to figure out where you're going. We know that your ability to orientate yourself decreases when the environment is more achromatic. So in grayscale environments, it's more difficult for us to find the way or locate a store, for example, if all of the facades are in glass, because when you look at the facades, you see yourself, you see your own reflection, which can also be stressful. So there has been studies done that when you pass a glass and steel building, your stress levels and your pulse increases.
Whoa.
When you walk in a historical street, for example, with cute little windows where the shop signs are maybe hand painted. There are different facades in each shop, for example. Maybe there's a little cafe on the corner with its own colors, and then the opposite happens. Our stress levels decrease and our pulse decreases, so we're in a calmer state, but we're also more curious. So instead of having difficulties with orientation, the opposite happens. It may be difficult to find exactly the story you're looking for, but you're more curious and you're interested and you want to figure it out, and it's kind of like a positive investigation instead of negative stress and disorientation.
Do you think maybe that is like, when going back to the whole idea of mammals, do you think that's because as mammals move around in the forest, when we like prehistoric man or woman, that we, like that our system is just somehow made for this extremely rich environment of like colors and materials. And then when we get into the urban environment and it's all the same, we don't get stimulated actually.
I think that's exactly it. And it's more difficult for our brain to figure out what's going on. Because for our brains, it's natural that there's a tree that's fallen over, for example, in the forest. There's a little path that we're working on. Then you see a tiny, tiny little lake, for example. And then there's some flowers. And, maybe there's a little bird, flying from a tree, or a woodpecker is pecking, There's so much stuff happening everywhere. But it's full of colors, it's full of nuances, and it's very tactile, everything, you can touch it. And I think that the historical way of us, making cities and coloring our houses and the little shops with the shop fronts, it's much closer to nature than what we're building today. We also had ornamentation on facades, for example. And people are now, saying that ornamentation is, like dressing a cake. It's just decoration. It's superficial. But it's actually quite the opposite, because it's making our environments more relaxing for the human brain.
It is fascinating to hear Dagny's thoughts on how important colors are for our orientation and well-being in the world. So I'm excited to hear how she will respond to my experiment. I'm doing this musical experiment every time in the podcast, which I call the sound of the color. And I'm doing that exactly because I think that color is so much more than just a visual impression, or as you said, just paint. It's an element of art and design that just kind of hits us on several of our senses. And so that's why I'm doing this experiment, to kind of explain now when we're doing something in sound where you can't see it, and color is obviously a big visual impression. But I want to try and describe color in a different way. So that is why I get my guests, which is you, to choose a color. And then I'll get a musician to compose the sound of that color that you choose. So I'm just wondering, today, what color do you want to hear the sound of?
I actually have chosen like a wallpaper.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and that is, we bought an old wallpaper design from the arts and crafts era, from a French wallpaper factory, which is no longer... it no longer exists. So we bought the rights to that pattern, and we've reworked it and modernized it so that it fits into 2025. It's we've also changed the colors into like a terracotta. One of the colorways is a terracotta tone, and we have used that in our library.
Can you describe that color to the listeners?
It's a number of colors put together, though, but I would say the main color is a soft terracotta tone, which is combined with a deeper terracotta in the checkered stripe. And then we also have a shade of pale blue combined with black and white. So it's like, but the biggest color in the wallpaper design is a pale terracotta.
Yeah. And I want to just ask now, when we're in this whole kind of idea of colors being able to hit us on other senses, I'm wondering, if we go with that thought, how does that color of pale terracotta smell?
I have been in Marrakesh.
Yeah.
And Marrakesh is terracotta colored. And to me, it smells a bit like... I'm not sure if dirt is the right way, but, maybe dry soil, for example. The smell is deep to me and very relaxing.
Also quite mineral, right?
Yes, like a mineral smell. It's such a natural color that our brains connect with, the ground in a way. And we also can associate them with, bricks. But we know that the way it affects us is that we kind of like lower our shoulders and makes it, easier to have conversations, for example, with other people. We feel more socially relaxed. Which I think is connected to, like it grounds us in a sense. Shades of brown has a similar effect on us. And we also like eat more and drink more in surroundings that have, these types of warm, natural colors on them.
Wow.
Restaurants and often use this strategically.
Buy a dessert as well.
Yes, buy a dessert as well. Maybe drink a couple of more glasses of wine. Maybe figuring out that we need like a second or a third or a fourth course. It's very good color for, social interaction. And, both eating and drinking is an important part of social interaction in Scandinavia and most of the rest of the world as well.
Yeah.
I think that the terracotta tones are really interesting to talk about, both when it comes to interiors, but also exteriors, facades, because it's a really important color for humans.
And when you say that, why do you think it's an important color to humans?
I think that, colors are basically light reflection, like you talked about in the episode with Grete Ødegaard and David Batchelor. It's a reflection of light, and light is energy. And the warm colors that we call warm, like shades of yellow and red and oranges, they have the longest color waves. And the longest color waves are the ones that we perceive that gives us energy.
Ah, interesting.
Yes, and in Scandinavia and the northern part of the planet, our daylight is very blue.
So not very, very warm in the colors.
No, it's not very warm, but also our nature turns gray during the winter months, and the sun disappears, I would say. I don't know, it probably rains in Denmark, but it snows in Norway. So for health purposes, it's important for us to feel, that we do get the energy that we lack from nature. So these warm colors have been popular and used widely in our part of the world for as long as we have been able to use colors. So I think that these colors have a value connected to our health, both our mental and physical health. That is, and it's important for us to use them. And I would say both inside in our homes and the places that we live during winter, because we're inside 90% of the time. But also outdoors, we need these terracotta tones and the ochre colors because they make us feel better.
Dagny talks about how colors affect us in many other ways than just as a visual impression. And I totally agree, which is why I came up with the musical experiment, The Sound of a Color. And in this episode, I have persuaded the composer and classically trained musician Sam Mumford to throw himself into my sound experiment. Sam Mumford's musical practice has evolved from his origins as a classically trained violinist to working as a composer. Now his main instrument is the guitar, and with that as his starting point, he has an experimental, tactile and autodidact approach to both composing and building sculptural instruments. He loves to collaborate and have created work for dance, visual arts, films and installations. He has performed and shown work at a range of venues such as the Barbican Center, the Joseph Meyerhoff Symphony Hall in Baltimore and the Greek National Opera Theatre. But today, I have asked him to create the sound of a color. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Sarah.
I'm so happy that you wanted to be part of this musical experiment that I call the sound of a color.
Yeah, really happy to be here.
That's good. In this episode, my guest is Dagny Thurmann-Moe, and she is a color designer who both works with interior design as well as being a color planner for city development. And we talk a lot about this, designing surroundings with colors, especially in the context of mental health and how colors can affect that. So when I asked her to pick a color that she wanted to hear the sound of, she picked a color from a wallpaper that she recently designed. And the color is pale terracotta.
Great.
And this is the color that I would like you to interpret musically. And how do you think you will do that?
Well, yeah, it makes me think of lots of different things, I guess. It's a very tactile colour. It draws me into like the earth and clay and, mud and things you want to put your fingers into. It's got a kind of soft sense to it. It makes me think of all of the processes around that, kind of taking things from the earth and manipulating them and moving them. I'm now living in Bornholm, and it's a colour I sort of notice in the natural landscape. It's present in the light at the end of the day and in the stone around. So I think it makes me think of all those things. I mean, that's the kind of immediate response to it.
Mm-hmm. And if you put some emotions on to that immediate response, what kind of emotion does that evoke with you?
Lots of things, in a way. I think obviously there is this warmth to it, and there is this nurturing almost sort of sense to it. It kind of holds you in a way. I think about it emotionally within music from physical terms as well. So there's a sort of intimacy to it, which I guess in a musical sense can be quite an emotional state. But then I think when I think of it in relation to clay and the earth and things like that, I guess there's also this sense of something kind of industrial, or almost, there's mechanisms to it as well about how we interact with these physical things, whether that's, it makes me think of, flesh as well, and the kind of bodies and, very, very sensual things.
It is very flesh colored.
Yeah, like very intimate in that way. So because of that relationship to those things, then maybe there's a kind of longer emotional narrative, if you like, something that can encompass also, that kind of delicate, soft, intimate, kind of warm, supportive space. But maybe there's a bigger story to tell through music,
And I just wanted to follow up on that. And if you had to interpret that musically, how would you then interpret all of what you just said?
Yeah, I'm really interested in the kind of way you physically interact with an instrument. So let's say I was working with strings or something. I think it would be interesting to think about those very tactile, small feelings between finger and string. So, and also the way the string, because it has this kind of sense of the natural world, maybe thinking about how a string vibrates and how you connect to the kind of harmonics within a string, sort of drawing out the sound from within a thing. Mm-hmm. So I might think about finding these sort of warm spaces with if I was using my guitar, for example, these kind of warm, innate, rich chordal space maybe, and then thinking about how when I interact with that physically, maybe it can create kind of harmonics, or
having a cuddle with the guitar.
Yeah, basically a bit like that. Yeah, which is basically what I do anyway. But no, I think this color gives me a chance to look at that. But then I think there's room within that for something more, contrasting possibly, because I think if you make that relationship to the earth and to bodies or to things that we see around us, then there's also a kind of the opposite of that within all of those things, something which is maybe more harsh and more opposing that. So maybe there's room for contrasts musically within this colour.
Well, I think that sounds super exciting, and then I'll look forward to talk to you again and hear your version of Pale Terracotta.
Thanks, Sarah.
In each episode of the podcast, I ask my guests to talk about a piece of work or a project that they have made which have had great colourful meaning to them or impact on their work. And Dagny and I agreed that we should talk about her facade project, Norway, in Oslo.
This is a project that we did a couple of years ago. It was actually almost a brand new row house in one of the older parts of Oslo, which is called Grünerløkka. It was originally painted beige, very, typically modern building. And the owners had a problem with it being sprayed with graffiti very, very often.
Ah, yeah.
So it looked a bit like an institution. I think that probably people thought that it was I don't know, some kind of health institution.
Yeah, or like maybe like council buildings or something like that.
Yeah, or it didn't look nice and it didn't look like it belonged there. So I think that's the reason for why it was tagged down, which we call it in Norwegian. It was sprayed with graffiti, regularly. So it was actually a problem because it was kind of like, it's a high-end project and it looked like shit like 2 years after it was completed.
What happened then? Well, how did you get involved with the project?
Actually, they called me, one of the owners, she called me and she was like, we have a problem with this building and the painters are getting in next week. It's a bit of a crisis. And I was like, next week? Are you kidding with me? And then she showed me the building and I was like, oh my goodness, this is a brilliant opportunity to show how much we can change a volume with colors. So what we do when we work with these modern buildings is that we make them appear smaller than they are.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, and we do that with dividing up the structure both horizontally and vertically. So you have this row house now that was beige, and we decided to divide it up vertically so that each section had its own color. But also the little drawn-in entrance had like 2 or 3 more colors. So when you walked past the building on the sidewalk, first you see like the facade color, and then you pass the first front door and you will see that, oh my God, there's a new color in here, and a bright little door. And then you walk past the next, and then you see like a new door and a new little surprise. We managed to deliver the full concept in a week, which was completely crazy, but we, I don't know, I kind of like knew where I wanted to go with it. And the owners were so enthusiastic, and when people found out that it was we that had done, like the colors and the project, we got so many pictures on Instagram and people sending us photos of the project, and it still happens that they do that.
It's just quite amazing. It's just, as you said, like it's 5 houses, so it's not like a huge building. It's 5 houses, 2 stories, and it's townhouses. It's not big, but I just think that is also like where you can see the effect of color, that it really...
Yeah, I think that what we did. I think that one thing was dividing up the volume into it making more sense. So you understood that there's 5 people living here. It's not a big building. It's not an institution. These are homes.
Private homes, people living in there.
Yeah, and also we used colors from the area. So we used facade colors that people would recognize from other parts of Grünerløkka, and then we added some modern colors on minor details, like the front door had like a brighter color than what we would see other places. We fine-tuned the colors a bit so that they had like traces of the 2020s, because I want to be time specific, but I also want to have like a cultural historical reference. I want people to understand that this building is a part of history, but it's also the color palette was made in the 20s. To me, it's like how Rome was built. It was built over thousands of years, but everything feels like it belongs together. You can't really tell what was built when, and everything fits perfectly together, and that's what we wanted to do.
I think that's put the stakes high. I think that's good, Dagny. You're just like, I'm building Rome.
Building Rome. I want it to be like when these owners have passed, and then maybe the kids take over, or maybe they sell the property, and then the new owners will be like, oh, this was built in the 1960s, but in the 2020s they did a really interesting renovation, which totally makes sense, and we really want to preserve that. So I want it to be, like preservable in a sense.
It is incredible how Dagny, with some divisions and new colors, has entirely transformed the building so that people are happier. It seems to me that Dagny's personal mission is to get more colors into the urban environment.
It is because you can't avoid architecture. I think that we've been through like 20, 30 years now where there's been some kind of a mantra where you're like, where architects have been like, if you feel provoked, that's fine. We want to evoke feelings with what we do. And if that is a negative feeling, then we've done our job because you're feeling something. And I completely disagree with that. You know, I think it's not understanding your role in society because architecture and our buildings are the biggest man-made structures we experience in our daily life. It has a huge and profound effect on how we feel. And if you feel uncomfortable when passing a building, or if you feel resentful, or if you feel indifferent, that is, I think, dangerous both for our mental health and for our cities, because we know that more and more people will be living in cities in the future, and we need the cities to feel safe and a happy place to live your life.
And less stressful.
Incredibly important. Less stressful. We need it to be somewhere where we can feel calm and that we can live a fulfilled life. We know that levels of schizophrenia, for example, are higher in urban environments that have little nature and colors in them.
Wow, interesting.
Yes, and we know that it's an important part of our well-being is our surroundings, and I think it's extremely a superficial approach to architecture to not take that responsibility seriously and not to understand it, because there is plenty of research backing up on that. And when it comes to Nordregata, after we finished the renovation and the paint job, the owners did not experience any more graffiti on the walls.
Amazing.
Yeah, and this has been several years now, and it still has the same effect. You know, instead of spraying graffiti on the walls, people take a picture of themselves in front of the facade, which never happened before because it was like an ugly part of an idyllic area. We know that people have positive associations with colors. We know that it relaxes us, and when we have all this knowledge, I think it's everyone who works with creating environments has an obligation, when we create environments that you can't avoid, to create environments that makes the people who have to be surrounded by them calmer and happier, and that they feel safer. It's so important.
I think so too. I agree. I think, and I want to say, this is maybe like a little bit, I was just thinking, us talking about nature, and you explaining how like you believe in that because of all the colors and materials that we meet in nature, and it kind of comes from our, the fact of us being mammals. Could you say that with Norway or like other cityscape projects, that adding color to architecture kind of brings architecture, this man-made structure, a little bit more back to nature?
That's exactly what our goal is, to make it feel closer to nature. It's like our biophilic approach to what we do.
Interesting.
It's about creating man-made environments that feel closer to nature.
It is no secret that I'm a big fan of Dagny's work and her strive for a more colorful world. She is a great inspiration. And therefore, I'm also very curious to hear by who and what she is inspired by herself.
It's a really difficult question for me because it really varies from project to project. So I'm very often inspired by the architecture, for example, itself. I think the place has a really important factor and role. So when we work with a building, there are two things that are important to me. And the first is the actual building, what does it look like? And the second part is the surrounding buildings and the surrounding environments, what do we have here? And I think that there is something to recognize in how we use colors. But it doesn't really have a specific source. So maybe it's this. Can I bring this?
Your brain or what? I would love to see the colors in your brain. That would be.
Oh, it's probably like flesh colored, like everyone
Yeah,
like a mix
it
up.
is.
It's kind of disgusting looking on the inside, but it's very difficult to me to pinpoint exactly where something is from. Something. Sometimes I can have like a pile, like we have right here.
Wow, yeah, a huge pile of fabrics and with all kinds of patterns and textures and also wallpapers.
Yeah, and very often I have piles of stuff, which I can, maybe we should say piles of stuff.
I love that. But I think actually that even ties back into when you say like my inspiration is piles of stuff, like ties back into this whole idea of you saying when we go out in nature, that's like what calms us down. That's what, because there's piles of stuff in nature. There's like everything.
God, you're like making sense of my brain right now.
That's it. Call me. I'm a color therapist. I'll make sense of any designer's color problems.
Yeah, because it's like I think that I have very big difficulties with things being too organized. So I don't really like fan decks, for example. I think that this.
Oh yeah, you're holding up like the RAL cord.
I think that this is incredibly uninspiring to look at. It gives me absolutely nothing when I look at this.
Yeah, the NCS fan. Yeah.
There are just 2,000 colors in here, which is nothing.
But I think for me as well, like when you're holding up the NCS fan of like all the colors, for me it's a tool where I'll go in the end.
Yes.
When I work. When I have to convey, like saying like I found all of these. This is my like I totally agree with like you have your pile and you have to convey your pile to someone. Yes, then you go into the fan deck of NCS colors.
And maybe I have a textile and I'm like, oh, there's a really nice olive green here, which kind of matches your shirt.
Oh yeah. It does actually. I have a very green shirt on today.
Yes, it's beautiful.
It does.
And then I can be like, I love this like olive avocado-ish green color, but I want a shade of green to go with it that doesn't exactly match, but I want something that's similar. Then I can go into the fan deck and see if I can find a green in that very poor selection of greens.
Yeah, so what is your pro tip when like choosing colors for your home?
It's to hire someone.
Call Dagny, she'll do it for you.
There are so many good like color experts in Scandinavia right now. So many interesting profiles. But I think that I would say that I think it's really important to analyze. A good tip could be, for example, to make kind of like a scrapbook or a very extensive Pinterest board where you pin whatever like speaks to you in some sense. I always stress the fact that you should not think too much when you pin. Just pin. This is not where you analyze. This is where you just, whatever speaks to me, whatever I like here is whatever I should pin. The analyzing part comes later on. And then you should, delve into your own history, like your style history. What colors have you liked for decades? Or for as long as you remember, what have stayed with you? Because we almost make like a contract with our clients where it's like, when we do this, you need to keep it that way. You're not allowed to change. So I think it's really important with aesthetic sustainability. But I also mean your home will not feel like a home if you keep changing it. So if you want to feel like you live in something that's your cave, that's your little safe space or haven, you need to not change. You need to perfect instead. So I think that lesson number one is to figure out what kind of colors you can live with for a long time. And if you want to make sure that you don't get sick of what you have on your walls, it's important also to not use, trend colors in every room. Maybe you can choose a trendy color in one of your rooms or in a detail, but try to choose something a little bit off the chart in the rest of the rooms, because the fact is that choosing what is called safe, like doing a Jotun's color chart in every home with the subdued, grayscale colors, is the least safe thing you can do. If we look at the homes that are being preserved and, identified as, important cultural or era staples in a sense. They often have individualistic choices in a sense. And that means that you reference the era you're in. I think that's a really good idea. Don't be afraid of being part of the roaring 20s, but make it, your own and take it further than what feels comfortable. And if that's difficult, if you don't have that sense of, understanding fully out what belongs together, or you don't feel safe enough making those decisions, I go back to my initial advice, which was to get help. Because if, decorating and doing colors, it's a profession.
Yes.
It's something you go through an education to learn how to do. And I have spent decades, learning my profession and learning about colors, which makes it easier for me to put together a color palette or a color concept or an aesthetic concept for a home than it is for someone who doesn't have that training. So it can save you a lot of money, investing in that just one time. Then you have what we call like a design manual for your home. That's what we often make for our clients. We make a manual on how to redecorate, how to make the home personal. And I think what's good with having a manual like that is that you don't have to do everything in one go.
You can build Rome in your house in that way.
You can do stages, When we work with our clients and they have bought, like an expensive sofa, but the textile is not ideal, then we're like, okay, use this sofa in that textile. We'll make it work until the textile is, worn out. When it's worn out, we're going to use this textile. So then in 5 years or something, you know which textile to use on your sofa when you're having it reupholstered. I think it's also part of the charm, to have that approach. Mm. If you change something constantly, change the colors of your walls or change the furniture, throw away all the furniture when you get a new place. That's the wrong approach to creating a home. Mm. So I think that, making peace with that it takes time, and that if you give yourself that time, you will end up with something that feels so close and you're so intimate, and you will, in a sense, get all those things that you need from your home. If it's relaxation, if it's energy, if it's focus or concentration, if it's, like having that little cave where you can just curl up and feel safe. Safety is something more and more of the population wants to feel in their homes because of what's happening out in the world. We want it to be our safe little haven, which is idyllic and friendly and warm and nice, where you get everything you need. And maybe in the future we can't travel that much because of restrictions. We need our homes to be more of a,
security blanket.
The ideal little place where you can just flourish.
I think that's a really nice idea, and I think also that's a perfect place to stop our amazing conversation about color. And I want to just thank you so much for being part today.
Thank you too. I love talking to colors with people who are like as enthusiastic as I am myself.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, yes, I get it. I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
Dagny and I have enjoyed our colorful, nerdy conversation so much. I'm wondering if Dagny's love of colors have been able to inspire this episode's musician, Sam Mumford, to make a piece of music. Let's hear what Sam came up with. Hi Sam, I'm back.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you again. How have you been?
I'm good, thanks. You?
I'm good. So I'm excited to hear the musical take you have come up with. Would you like to tell us about your process?
Of course, yeah. I tried quite a few different things. I was really interested in following this kind of intimate, tactile process. And I felt that maybe there was a way to follow the physicality thing, this sort of dialogue with my instrument, and find these small and very intimate connections between the way I touch the string and the sound that comes out. So I kind of followed that more intimate, warm place, but then little moments maybe of some of the opposing side of that, the kind of more, looking at kind of how to reference the natural world a bit as well, because I feel like this colour is almost like a vehicle into that. I sort of started noticing the colour everywhere in the landscape around me, so I think I was looking to try and draw those connections.
And how, when you say that, draw the connection to the natural landscape, like musically, like quite specific, how did you do that?
How did I... I think it's hard to be specific with music, because music is a vehicle for, you can interpret it in lots of different ways, in the same way that colour can be a vehicle for a lot of different emotions and also translations as well, right? But I think I've used some sounds that have been made from natural materials, stone and wood and things that kind of talk of the natural world through the quality of their sound.
So almost like instruments made you're thinking about how the instrument, what the material the instrument is made out of.
Yeah, sampling things from natural materials. And then, and I think also from what you talked about the conversations around the colour that you'd already had, I think I wanted to bring in this sort of sense of warmth, then how that kind of grows and shifts, coming to warmth and coming away from warmth, and kind of moving between these two spaces was what I've tried to follow.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting.
I was also quite into this sense of body and flesh as well, and that kind of like more sensual side to the colour.
How did that come across for you?
Yeah, again with these kind of very a lot to do with this sort of tactile sense of playing and feeling, and the very ultra sensitive kind of relationship you can have between your body and an instrument, sort of really tactile, really, and you the vibrations of a string against your finger, you kind of feel this. It's all very internal, I guess. You don't know as a musician how much that translates across to other people, but I think that intimacy of sound production, I think, for me, talks of these other kind of sensual relationships we might have with a thing, a person, or the natural world, or that kind of dialogue, I think, is within that process.
I think that sounds super interesting, like your internal kind of emotional process when creating the music actually also is part of the musical piece.
Yeah, I think that, definitely.
I think that sounds good, and I think we should ask the listeners to put their headphones on and turn up the volume, get comfortable, close your eyes, because here comes the sound of pale terracotta. Thank you very much for listening. To see more about the work of the guest in this episode, please head over to the podcast website via the link in the show notes. Remember to follow the show on your favorite podcast app to hear all about upcoming episodes. And if you like what you heard, please leave the podcast a quick review. And, of course, share it with anyone else who might enjoy it too.